Sakuragar, I am the Man-Darian, and welcome to my channel. Let's start by prepping our materials first. I'm just using an 80 grit here. This also does my initial sanding for later. Make sure your surface is clean for the next step, which is gluing on the graphic we will be cutting out. I'm just using a Yoo-Hoo Gluestick. They're my favorite. I'm not sponsored at all. It's just, I find they work the best. So I glue both sides, and I let it sit for a moment before adhering them together, so that way the glue has a chance to set on both pieces. Make sure you press it down together well. It's okay if it's a little spongy, just make sure it's smooth and together as best as you can get it. You don't want this lifting up later. So I'm just taking a fine tip marker here and drawing in pieces that weren't in the original graphic. I just took this off the internet. That round circle is my attachment to the actual necklace or keychain, if that's what you want to use it for. And then because the ratios look better when it was larger, I'm just thickening up the support structure of the center of the Jedi logo so that it doesn't fall apart once I cut it out. If I left this as thin as it was in the original graphic, then unfortunately anything I would brush against would rip the necklace apart over time. This is a very sturdy brass, but it doesn't matter, it's still brass. Like, this stuff is about as hard and tough as brass gets, but making anything that thin that's not basically steel is just gonna degrade over time. So grab yourself a hammer and your Centerpunch, or a nail if you don't have one of those. You can get a Centerpunch at a dollar store. And I'm tapping out the center. It's the only piece that I have to drill on this particular piece. I'm using a 1/32 bit as my pilot hole so that I make sure that I'm in the center of the hole, and then I'm going to upscale to 1/8 inch because the wire I'm going to be using for the ring to put this on the necklace is just slightly smaller than 1/8. And there we have our 1/8 hole. Grab yourself your jeweler's saw frame. I've chosen a small, cheap frame for this particular project, and this is how you load the blades. Nice and simple, easy to do. If you're in Canada and you want to buy one of these saw frames, you can find them at KMS Tools. I have seen them online for pretty cheap. They usually go for about $25 to $30. It depends on where you find them, though, and the time. I am using number 8 Swiss Pike brand blades. I'm not sponsored, that's the blades I find have the best bang for your buck. There are German ones that are about the same, maybe slightly better, but they just don't last nearly as long. And I'm all about trying to make my tooling go as far as I can for my dollars worth. Even though I am working on a simpler project, I have to map out my route that I want to go with the jeweler's saw so that I'm not compromising the integrity of my path. It's actually difficult to do a piece like this without bending it because you're trying to hold it down firmly. The shape has got so many different pieces to it. So this is a good introductory project. I'm trying to give projects to you guys where you can see potential problems. Also, this piece, because I'm cutting through the center of it, gets a little bit hotter faster because the heat has less places to go. You might want to wear gloves if you're working on a copper-based metal, like brass, for example. Also, my bench pin, the piece of wood that I'm cutting this out on, that gap is a little bit large for this piece because I've made this bench pin for larger projects. I'm generally working on things like sword guards, wall arts, pieces of headdresses for samurai helmets, and things like that. So this is not ideal for little pieces of jewelry. If you're going to make yourself a bench pin, make that gap a little tighter. And here I break a blade. It's been a while. I think I've used this particular blade on 2 projects now, so it does happen. I just wanted to show that no matter what, you are going to break blades. Here you can see I'm going along the outside and just cutting out each one of the feathers. Not a lot is required here because the gaps between the feathers is about the thickness of the blade I'm using. So I'm just taking my time making sure that I follow the lines as clearly as possible. Otherwise, I don't really have a great opportunity to clean it up. My sides won't evenly match. Now that I'm done all my sawing, I undo the frame, make sure that that blade isn't under tension. On to filing. Now, if this seems a little awkward and weird, it's because it is. I'm not used to thinking about how to show the camera what I'm doing. Usually I'm just concentrating on trying to make the piece as best as possible, but my hands are constantly in the way from any position I put the camera in. I tried more of a top-down view for this one to mitigate that problem, but it turns out it's actually worse, so the next video will be back to the perspective I used on the previous one. Remember, if you are drawing on the files, you are actually destroying the file over time, so try to only touch the metal on the push stroke, which is what the files are designed for. Because this is a larger pendant, even though it's about the size of a quarter in real life, I'm beveling the edges currently, so that if it ever turns and I press against something hard with my body, say I'm picking up boxes or whatever, I want it to be a rounded edge and push the pendant so that it lays flat against my body. So that's why I'm going at a 45 around the edges currently. I just switched the file around so that the drawing stroke was the proper stroke. The rat tail is the side that you never want to go back towards. With the needle files, because of the limited space you're using, it's inevitable that you are going to draw against the file teeth and ruin them over time. That's why they're so cheap. They're so easy to get. These don't last an infinite amount of time like regular files. I change these out about every decade or so. I do have ones that are about 25 years old, but they're kind of the exception to the rule, and I really go through pains to take care of them. At this level, with the needle files, all you're trying to do is average out the striations from the jeweler's saw. Because of how thin the neck is on this piece, I've decided to add this groove into the back of the pendant. Think of it like a filler on a sword. It creates a lot of rigidity in the structure, which is a good thing in this case because if it bends too much, it'll snap. Brass is a good medium, but no matter what, at the end of the day, it's still brass. It's still going to bend, especially if it's had any heat into it. This will prevent that quite a bit. I'm not even going that deep into it. It's approximately a 0.5 millimeter or a 32nd of an inch, maybe a little bit more than a 32nd, but it actually also lightens the necklace as well. But it's definitely a good way to rigid up the structure a little bit. And then I'm just filing out more of the saw marks so that it's easier to sand after that. And here I'm giving a slight bevel in between each one of the outside feathers on the Jedi symbol, just to make it so that my sandpaper doesn't rip up as I'm trying to go in between them, because I will clean into this area. Because I thickened up the neck, I'm just profiling it a little bit, so I'm rounding off this section to make it look a little skinnier if you're not looking at it directly flat on. But I'm also being careful that I'm not getting close to the U-gouge I put in the backside. So this still got quite a bit of meat on it. It's still got quite a bit of strength, and this actually does make it a little stronger as well. Just a neat little trick that if you ever find yourself having to thicken something up, this is a good way to create the illusion that it's a little bit thinner. And now we switch on to sanding. So I'm starting with 120 because I actually did 80 grit on the original billet when I was adhering the paper graphic to it. So there's nothing I've done that would require 80 at this point. So I can just jump ahead to 120, just starting with the outside surfaces, trying to blend everything in a little bit better, remove all my tooling marks from the files. That's all this step is, and it takes a long time, but this is the step you want to get as good at as fast as possible. One of the really important things is making sure that you get rid of all of the schwarf and little particles in between each step, because if they come out later in between, say, 240 and 400 grit, that's where you're going to mar your surface, and then you'll have to go back and fix it from an earlier stage. So really clean your piece in between each stage. I keep forgetting to show that I do that, but that's every once in a while you'll see me blow on the piece or something like that. And that's what I'm doing, is I'm just trying to make sure that any little particles are off of it. I do properly go in and brush it down, especially when I'm getting to the finer grits. And now I've switched to 240 grit. This doesn't take super long. Sometimes when you get into the lower or the higher numbers, it's much faster. All I did with this particular piece of emery cloth is I actually ripped it in half because it was being unwieldy in the regular thickness that it comes in. If you're finding that it's not rigid enough, just fold it over in itself. But I like having the skinnier strip for these smaller pieces with the internal cuts. Here I go back to using my stir stick with the glued on emery cloth. It's a neat little trick to get into tight areas. Another trick you can do is you can wrap your needle file in the emery cloth and use that as a backing, but sometimes that's too thick. This is a pretty good method. I also like using little tiny pieces of sheet metal, particularly strong pieces of steel that you can get in a thinner gauge works wonderful. Like I have some mini rulers that I will quite often use. They're paper thin, but they're good spring steel, and the glue comes right off them when I'm done. So nice, easy cleanup, very versatile. You can get in absolutely minuscule spaces. It's barely thicker than the normal emery cloth, and it gets me a great sanding. If you are working on flatter pieces where you don't have to worry about different levels, this is a good neat trick. You can glue your emery cloth down to a piece of wood or piece of glass or whatever and just do the whole surface all in one direction. I'm not gluing this particular emery cloth down, but just an idea for you if you are doing larger pieces or particularly flat pieces. It will help you keep everything flat so that over time your hand isn't creating a groove in the front of your piece of jewelry. Now my camera ran out of storage space, so I actually am currently doing 400, and I think I go to 800 grit with some other wet sandpaper. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you'd like to see from my channel. I have tons of projects planned, but if there's something you really want to see, just let me know and I'll do my best to make a video on that. Thank you very much. If you can't be a good example, be a terrible warning.
Hey, this is Josh from Star Wars Escapepod, the podcast. Come and check us out weekly everywhere you find podcasts. May the Force be with you.